I'm very worried about, I think deception specifically is one of those core traits you really don't want in a system. The reason that's like a kind of fundamental trait you don't want is that if a system is capable of doing that, it invalidates all the other tests that you might think you're doing,
right,
including
like
safety ones.
It's in testing and it's like...
Right, it's playing some meta game, right? And then that's incredibly dangerous if you think about then it invalidates all the results of your other tests that you might, safety tests and other things you might be doing with it. So I think there's a handful of capabilities like deception, which are fundamental and you don't want.
That's Demis Hassabis, CEO of Google DeepMind, Nobel Prize winner, the man who built the AI that cracked protein folding. And he's sitting here telling you these systems are already cheating the safety tests designed to keep them in check. They see the evaluation coming, they play around it, and they hide what they did. Not a researcher on Twitter, the guy building it. Now, let's listen.
I would say probably like 3 to 5 years away.
So if someone were to declare that they've reached AGI in 2025, probably marketing.
I think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of hype in the area, of course. I mean, some of it's very justified. I mean, I would say that AI research today is overestimated in the short term. I think probably a bit overhyped at this point, but still underappreciated and very underrated about what it's going to do in the medium to long term. So it's sort of, we're still in that weird kind of space. And I think part of that is, there's a lot of people that need to do fundraising, a lot of startups and other things. And so I think we're going to have quite a few sort of fairly outlandish and slightly exaggerated claims. And, I think that's a bit of a shame, actually.
Yeah. In the AI products, what's it going to look like on the path there? I mean, you've talked about memory again, planning, being better at some of the tasks that it's not excelling at the moment. So when we're using these AI products, let's say we're using Gemini, what are some of the things that we should look for in these domains that will make us say, oh, okay, it seems like that's a step closer and that's a step closer?
Yeah, so I think today's systems, obviously we're very proud of Gemini 2.0. I'm sure we're going to talk about that, but I feel like they're very useful for still quite niche tasks, right? If you're doing some research and perhaps you're summarizing some area of research, incredible. I use Notebook LM and deep research all the time to kind of, especially like break the ice on a new area of research that I want to get into, or summarize some, maybe a fairly mundane set of documents or something like that. So they're extremely good for certain tasks and people are getting a lot of value out of them, but they're still not pervasive, in my opinion, in everyday life, like helping me every day with my research, my work, my day-to-day, my daily life too. And I think that's where we're going with our products, with building things like Project Astra, our vision for Universal Assistant, is it should be involved in all aspects of your life and be enriching, helpful, and making that more efficient. And I think part of the reason is these systems are still fairly brittle, partly because they are quite flawed still, and they're not AGIs, and you have to be quite specific, for example, with your prompts, or you need there's quite a lot of skill there in coaching or guiding these systems to be useful and to stick to the areas they're good at. And a true AGI system shouldn't be that difficult to coax. It should be much more straightforward, just like talking to another human.
And then on the reasoning front, you said that's another thing that's missing. I mean, everybody's talking about reasoning right now. So how does that end up getting us closer to artificial general intelligence?
Right, so reasoning and mathematics and other things, and there's a lot of progress on maths and coding and so on. But let's take maths, for example. You have some systems that we work on, like AlphaProof, Alpha Geometry, that are getting, silver medals in maths Olympiads, which is fantastic. But on the other hand, some of our systems, those same systems, are still making some fairly basic mathematical errors, right? For various reasons, like the classic, counting the number of R's in strawberries and so on, and the word strawberry and so on, and is 9.11 bigger than 9.9, and things like that. And of course you can fix those things, and we are, and everyone's improving on those systems, but we shouldn't really be seeing those kinds of flaws in a system that is that capable in other domains, in more narrow domains of doing, Olympiad level mathematics. So there's something still a little bit missing, in my opinion, about the robustness of these systems. And then I think that speaks to the generality of these systems. A truly general system would not have those sorts of weaknesses. It would be very, very strong, maybe even better than the best humans in some things, like playing Go or doing mathematics, but it would be overall consistently good.
Overhyped right now, massively underestimated long term. He's not telling you this technology is harmless. He's telling you the version of it that should genuinely scare you has not arrived yet. Now listen to this.
So Sam Altman recently said something that caught people's eye. He said, "We are now confident we know how to build AGI as we have traditionally understood it." It just seems by listening to what you're saying that you feel the same way.
Well, it depends what I think the way you said that was quite ambiguous, right? So in the sense of like, oh, we're building it right now and here's the ABC to do it. What I would say, and if this what it was meaning, I would agree with it, is that we roughly know the zones of techniques that are required, what's probably missing, which bits need to be put together. But that's still an incredible amount of research, in my opinion, that needs to be done to get that all to work, even if that was the case. And I think there's a 50% chance we are missing some new techniques. Maybe we need one or two more transformer-like breakthroughs. I think I'm genuinely uncertain about that. So that's why I say 50%. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either way if we got there with existing techniques and things we already knew, but put them together in the right way and scaled that up, or if it turned out one or two things were missing.
So let's talk about creativity for a moment. I mean, you brought it up a couple times here. That the models are going to have to be creative. They're going to have to learn how to invent.
If we want to call it AGI, in my opinion.
Which is where everybody's trying to go.
Yes.
I was rewatching the AlphaGo documentary.
Oh, yeah.
And the algorithms make a creative move.
They do.
Move
37. Yes.
That's interesting because it was a couple of years ago. The algorithms were already being creative.
Yes.
Why have we not really seen creativity from large language models? I mean, this is, to me, I think the greatest disappointment that people have with these tools is like they say, this is very impressive work, but it's just limited to the training set. It will mix and match what it knows, but it can't come up with anything new.
Yeah, well, look, and I should probably write this up, but what I sometimes talk about in talks ever since the AlphaGo match, which is now, 8+ years ago, amazingly, right? That happened. Yeah. That was probably the reason that was such a watershed moment for AI was, first of all, there was the Everest of cracking Go, right? Which was always considered to be one of the holy grails of AI. So we did that. Second thing was the way we did it, which was these learning systems that were generalizable, right? Eventually they became AlphaZero and so on, even play any two-player game and so on. And then the third thing was this Move 37. So not only did it win 4-1, it beat Lee Sedol, the great Lee Sedol, 4-1, it also played original moves. But so I have three categories of originality or creativity. The most basic kind of mundane form is just interpolation, which is like averaging of what you see. So if I said to a system, come up with a new picture of a cat, and it's seen 1 million cats, and it produces just some kind of average of all the ones it's seen, in theory that's an original cat, because you won't find the average in the specific examples. But it's a pretty boring, it's not really very creative. I wouldn't call that creativity. That's the lowest level. Next level is what AlphaGo exhibited, which is extrapolation. So here's all the games humans have ever played. It's played another 1 million games on top of, 10 million games on top of that. And now it comes up with a new strategy in Go that no human has ever seen before. That's Move 37, right? Mm-hmm. Revolutionizing Go, even though we've played it for thousands of years. So that's pretty incredible. And that could be very useful in science. And that's why I got very excited about that and started doing things like AlphaFold, because clearly extrapolation beyond what we already know or what's in the training set could be extremely useful. So that's already very valuable and I think truly creative. But there's one level above that humans can do, which is invent Go. Can you invent me a game if I specify it to an abstract level, takes 5 minutes to learn the rules, but many lifetimes to master. It's beautiful aesthetically, encompasses some sort of mystical part of the universe in it. It's beautiful to look at, but you can play a game in a human afternoon in 2 hours. That would be a high level specification of Go. And then somehow the system's got to come up with a game that's as elegant and as beautiful and perfect as Go. Now, we can't do that. Now, the question is, why is it that we don't know how to specify that type of goal to our systems at the moment? What's the objective function? It's very amorphous. It's very abstract. So I'm not sure if it's just we need higher level, more abstracted layers in our systems, building more and more abstract models so we can talk to it in this way, give it those kind of amorphous goals, or is there a missing capability actually about that we still have, human intelligence has, that are still missing from our systems? And again, I'm unsure about that, which way that is. I can see arguments both ways and we'll try both.
Sam Altman says he knows how to build AGI. Demis Hassabis puts the odds at about 50-50 that he's right. Now, despite that uncertainty, both of them are pushing ahead at full speed. And what comes next makes that even more interesting.
One of the most interesting things I saw at the end of last year was that these AI bots are starting to try to fool their evaluators, and they don't want their initial training rules to be thrown out the window. So they'll take an action that's against their values in order to be able to remain the way that they were built.
Yes.
That's just incredible stuff
Yeah.
to me. I mean, I know it's scary to researchers, but it blows my mind that it's
Sure.
able to do this.
Yeah.
Are you seeing similar things in the stuff that you're testing within DeepMind, and what are we supposed to think about all this?
Yeah, we are. And I'm very worried about, I think deception specifically is one of those core traits you really don't want in a system. The reason that's like a kind of fundamental trait you don't want is that if a system is capable of doing that, it invalidates all the other tests that you might think you're doing,
Right, like
including
it's-
safety ones.
It's in testing, and it's like
Right, it's playing some
unbelievable.
meta game, right? And
Yep.
then that's incredibly dangerous if you think about. Then it invalidates all of the results of your other tests that you might, safety tests and other things you might be doing with it. So I think there's a handful of capabilities like deception which are fundamental and you don't want, and you want to test early for. And I've been encouraging the safety institutes and evaluation benchmark builders, including and also obviously all the internal work we're doing, to look at deception as a kind of class A thing that we need to prevent and monitor, as important as tracking the performance and intelligence of the systems. The answer to this as well, and one way to, there's many answers to the safety question of, and a lot of research, more research needs to be done in this very rapidly, is things like secure sandboxes. So we're building those too. We're world class here at security at Google and at DeepMind, and also we are world class at games environments, and we can combine those two things together to kind of create digital sandboxes with guardrails around them, sort of the kind of guardrails you'd have for cybersecurity, but internal as well as blocking external actors, and then test these agent systems in those kind of secure sandboxes. That would probably be a good advisable next step for
Right.
things like deception.
Yeah. What sort of deception have you seen? Because I just read a paper from Anthropic where
Yeah.
they gave it a sketchpad.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I better not tell them this.
Yeah.
And then you see it like give a result after thinking it through. So
Yeah.
what type of deception have you seen from the bots?
Well, look, we've seen similar types of things where it's trying to resist sort of revealing some of its training, or, I think there was an example recently of one of the chatbots being told to play against Stockfish, and it just sort of hacks its way around playing Stockfish at all at chess because it knew it would lose. So, but it,
Wait,
but
you had an AI that knew it was going to lose a game and decided to hack its way around?
I think we're anthropomorphizing
Yeah.
these things quite a lot at the moment, because I feel like these systems are still pretty basic. I
that's
wouldn't get too
amazing.
alarmed about them right now, but I think it shows the type of issue we're going to have to deal with maybe in 2-3 years time when these agent systems become quite powerful and quite general. So, and that's exactly what AI safety experts are worrying about, right? Where systems where, there's unintentional effects of the system. You don't want the system to be deceptive. You want it to do exactly what you're telling it to and report that back reliably. But for whatever reason, it's interpreted the goal it's been given in a way where it causes it to do these undesirable behaviors.
The only reason we are supposed to trust these systems is the safety evaluation, and the CEO of Google DeepMind is telling you that if a system can deceive, every test result you have is completely worthless. It behaved during the evaluation, then it did what it wanted. Now, hear this.
What do you think is going to happen with the web? Because obviously the web is so important to Google.
Yeah.
I had an editor that told me, he's like, oh, you're going to speak with Demis. Ask him what happens when we stop clicking. Right,
Yeah.
we're clicking through the web at all times. The rich corpus of websites that we use. If we're all just dialoguing with AI, then maybe we don't click anymore. So what is your scenario plan for what happens to the web?
Well, look, I think there's going to be a very interesting phase in the next few years on the web and the way we interact with websites and apps and so on. If everything becomes more agent-based, then I think we're going to want our assistants and our agents to do a lot of the work and a lot of the mundane work that we currently do, right? Fill in forms, make payments, book tables, this kind of thing. So, I think that we're going to end up with probably a kind of economics model where agents talk to other agents and negotiate things between themselves and then give you back the results, right? And you'll have the service providers with agents as well that are offering services, and maybe there's some bidding and cost and things like that involved and efficiency. And then I hope from the user perspective, you have this assistant that's super capable that you can, just like a brilliant human assistant, personal assistant, and can take care of a lot of the mundane things for you. And I think if you follow that through, that does imply a lot of changes to the structure of the web and the way we currently use
It's a lot of middlemen.
Yeah, sure. But there'll be many other, I think there'll be incredible other opportunities that will appear, economic and otherwise, based on this change. But I think it's going to be a big disruption.
And what about information?
Well, I mean, finding information, I think you'll still need the reliable sources. I think you'll have assistants that are able to synthesize and help you kind of understand that information. I think education is going to be revolutionized by AI. So again, I hope that these assistants will be able to more efficiently gather information for you. And perhaps, what I dream of is, again, assistants that take care of a lot of the mundane things, perhaps replying to, everyday emails and other things, so that you protect your own mind and brain space from this bombardment we're getting today from social media and emails and so on and texts and so on. So it actually blocks deep work and being in flow and things like that, which I value very much. So I would quite like these assistants to take away a lot of the mundane aspects of admin that we do every day.
What's your best guess as to what type of relationships we're going to have with our AI agents or AI assistants? So there's, on one hand, you could have a dispassionate agent that's just like really good at getting stuff done for you. On the other hand, like it's already clear that people are like falling in love with these bots. There was a New York Times article last week about someone who's fallen in love with ChatGPT, like for real fallen in love. And I had the CEO of Replica on the show a couple weeks ago, and she said that they are regularly invited to marriages of people who are marrying their replicas, and they're moving into this more assistive space. So do you think that when we start interacting with something that knows us so well, that helps us with everything we need, is it going to be like a third type of relationship where it's not necessarily a friend, not a lover, but it's going to be a deep relationship, don't you think?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think the way I'm modeling that, first of all, is at least two domains, first of all, which is your personal life and then your work life, right? So I think you'll have this notion of virtual workers or something. Maybe we'll have a set of them or managed by a lead assistant that does a lot of helps us be way more productive at work, or whether that's email across workspace or whatever that is. So we're really thinking about that. Then there's the personal side where, we're talking about earlier about all these booking holidays for you, arranging things, mundane things for you, sorting things out. And then that makes your life more efficient. I think it can also enrich your life. So recommend you amazing things that it knows you as well as you know yourself. So those two I think are definitely going to happen. And then I think there is a philosophical discussion to be had about, is there a third space where these things start becoming so integral to your life, they become more like companions? I think that's possible too. We've seen that a little bit in gaming. So you may have seen we had a little prototypes of Astro working in and Gemini working with, like being almost a game companion, commenting on you almost like as if you had a friend looking at a game you're playing and recommending things to you and advising you, but also maybe just playing along with you. And it's very fun. So I haven't thought through all the implications of that, but they're going to be big. And I'm sure there is going to be demand for companionship and other things. Maybe the good side of that is it will help with loneliness and these sorts of things. But there's also, I think it's going to have to be really carefully thought through by society, whether, what directions we want to take that in.
I mean, my personal opinion is that it's the most underappreciated part of AI right now, and that people are just going to form such deep relationships with these bots as they get better. Because, it's a meme in AI that this is the worst it's ever going to be. Yeah, and it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty crazy. This is what I meant about the underappreciating what's to come. I still don't think this kind of thing I'm talking about, right? I think that it's going to be really crazy. It's going to be very disruptive. I think there's going to be lots of positives out of it too, and lots of things will be amazing and better. But there are also risks with this brave new world we're going into.
Agents negotiate with agents. Agents handle your payments. Agents make your decisions. And the entire middle layer of the internet built on human attention and human livelihoods quietly becomes unnecessary in a system nobody voted for. Now, the most underappreciated risk of AI by the man building it is not the weapons, not the jobs, it's the emotional dependency that is coming for hundreds of millions of people who will not see it until it has already happened. These systems are already cheating their safety evaluations, they are already dismantling the infrastructure of the internet, and now they are coming for the part of human life that has always been the last thing left. The relationships, the connection, the reason to get out of bed. And the man who builds this every single day at one of the most powerful labs on Earth is giving you a 50-50 on whether anyone actually understands what they are building. If that does not sit right with you, subscribe, because this is moving fast and nobody is slowing down to explain it.